Hyun-woo stared at the supply reports on his desk and rubbed his tired eyes. Another normal day on Kepler 442b, another stack of mining quotas and equipment requests. The colony had been running smoothly for 3 years now, pulling rare metals from the asteroid belt while families built new lives on this distant world. The morning coffee was still warm when Bo-Ra burst through his office door. Her face was pale and she clutched a datapad like her life depended on it. "Sir, we have a problem," she said, her voice shaking. "The long-range sensors are picking up something big." Hyun-woo stood up and followed her to the communications center. The main screen showed dozens of red dots moving toward their system. Each dot was massive, bigger than any ship in the known galaxy. "How many?" he asked. 200 and counting, Bo-Ra replied. "They're still coming out of jump space." Hyun-woo felt his stomach drop. The colony had basic defenses, nothing that could handle even one military ship, let alone hundreds. He watched the dots move closer and tried to think of options. There were none. "Send a message to Earth Command," he ordered. "Tell them we need help." Bo-Ra shook her head. "Sir, the nearest human fleet is 6 months away. These ships will be here in 3 hours." The first ship emerged from the asteroid field, and the cameras caught sight of it. Hyun-woo had never seen anything like it. The vessel was organic, like a giant bug made of metal and flesh. Spines jutted from its hull, and strange lights pulsed along its sides like a heartbeat. "What are those things?" someone whispered. Old Martinez, the colony's historian, pushed through the crowd. His face was white as he stared at the screen. "Those are Vorthak ships," he said quietly. "I've seen pictures in the old archives." Vorthak? Hyun-woo had never heard the name. "Biomechanical parasites," Martinez explained. "They eat entire civilizations, strip planets down to the core and move on. No one has seen them for 1,000 years. More ships kept appearing. The sensors couldn't count them all anymore." Hyun-woo realized with growing horror that this wasn't a raid or an attack. This was an invasion fleet. "Sir," Bo-Ra called out, "they're launching smaller ships, hundreds of them, heading straight for us." Hyun-woo activated the colony's emergency protocols. Shields came online, defense turrets powered up, and warning sirens echoed through the settlement. Families ran for the underground shelters while the security teams took their positions. The first Vorthak fighters screamed through the atmosphere like angry wasps. They opened fire with weapons that burned through rock and metal like paper. The colony's shields held for now, but Hyun-woo could see the power levels dropping fast. "How long can the shields last?" he asked the chief engineer. "Maybe an hour, sir. Those weapons are eating through our power grid." Hyun-woo made a decision. If they were going to die here, at least someone should know what happened. "Bo-Ra, send out a general distress call. All frequencies, maximum power." Bo-Ra's fingers flew over her console. "Standard distress signal is broadcasting, sir." No, not just standard. Hyun-woo remembered something from his academy training. Something about old emergency protocols. "Check the historical database. There should be ancient human emergency channels." Bo-Ra looked confused but started searching. After a few minutes, she found something buried deep in the ship's memory banks. "Sir, there's an old channel here. It's marked with symbols I don't recognize." "What do the symbols mean?" Bo-Ra ran them through the translation system. The computer took a long time to process, searching through dead languages and forgotten dialects. Finally, words appeared on the screen. "Final resort." "Send the message on that channel too," Hyun-woo ordered. Outside, the Vorthak ships had formed a circle around the planet. Plasma fire rained down like a deadly storm, turning the colony's outer defenses into molten slag. The shields flickered and sparked as power systems failed one by one. In the shelters below, children cried while their parents held them close. Everyone knew what was coming. The Vorthak didn't take prisoners or leave survivors. They consumed everything. Hyun-woo stood in the command center and watched his world burn. The communications array was still working somehow, broadcasting their final message into the void. He wondered if anyone would even receive it, or if they would just become another dead colony in the darkness. "Sir," Bo-Ra said quietly, "the message is transmitting on both channels." "Good," Hyun-woo replied. "At least we tried." The shields finally collapsed with a sound like breaking glass. Vorthak fighters poured through the gap, their weapons tearing through buildings and streets. The colony's few defense turrets fought back, but it was like throwing stones at a hurricane. Hyun-woo grabbed a weapon from the emergency locker and prepared to make his last stand. Whatever happened next, he wouldn't go down without a fight. But then something strange happened. The Vorthak fighters suddenly pulled back, rising into the atmosphere as if they had been called home. The massive ships in orbit stopped firing and began moving away from the planet. "What's happening?" someone asked. Bo-Ra checked her sensors. "Sir, they're retreating, all of them." "That doesn't make sense," Hyun-woo said. "Why would they leave now?" The answer came from the deep space sensors. Something was moving out there in the darkness between stars, something the size of a moon. It wasn't on any star charts, and it didn't match any known ship design. "Sir," Bo-Ra whispered, "I think our message was received. The Vorthak fleet was, fleeing now, jumping back into hyperspace as fast as their ships could manage. Whatever was coming scared them more than the thought of losing their prey." Hyun-woo stared at the sensors and felt a chill run down his spine. In all his years of studying human history, he had never heard of ships that could frighten the Vorthak. But the evidence was right there on the screen. "Bo-Ra, run a scan on that approaching object." "I'm trying, sir, but it's not showing up properly. The sensors can't get a clear reading." "Keep trying." Hours passed. The mysterious object grew closer, but it remained hidden in the shadows between stars. All they could see were glimpses of something vast and dark, moving with purpose toward their small colony. When morning came to Kepler 442b, the survivors emerged from their shelters to find their world scarred but alive. The Vorthak were gone, fled into the depths of space like frightened animals. But something else was out there now, something that had answered their desperate call for help. Hyun-woo stood in the ruins of his command center and wondered what kind of ancient guardian had heard their message. He had a feeling they were about to find out. The old emergency channel crackled with static, and then a voice spoke in perfect Korean. "Colony Kepler 442b, this is Sol Prime. We received your distress call. Help is on the way." Hyun-woo looked at Bo-Ra and she looked back at him. Neither of them had ever heard of a ship called Sol Prime, but somehow it felt like coming home. Admiral Tae-min walked through the corridors of the diplomatic ship New Seoul, reviewing the trade agreements his team had just finished. 3 months of negotiations with the Altrian Republic had finally paid off. Humanity's reputation as fair, dealers and peaceful mediators was growing stronger every year. The ship's communication officer, Lieutenant Sung-ho, appeared at his side with a worried expression. "Admiral, we're receiving an urgent message from Earth Command." Tae-min took the datapad and read the message twice. It made no sense. Ancient defense protocol activated, he said aloud. All human vessels are to withdraw immediately from Sector 7? What does that mean? Sung Ho shook his head. I've never heard of an ancient defense protocol, sir, but the message came with the highest priority codes. Taemin called his senior staff to the bridge. Captain Nari, his second-in-command, was just as confused as everyone else. Sir, our current position puts us at the edge of Sector 7, she reported. If we're supposed to withdraw, where should we go? I don't know, Taemin admitted. But when Earth Command uses priority codes, we listen. He gave the order to change course and move away from Sector 7. As the new soul turned toward empty space, Taemin tried to make sense of the situation. In his 20 years of military service, he had never heard of any ancient protocols. Sung Ho, contact Earth Command. I want to speak to someone who can explain what's happening. I've been trying, sir. All they'll say is that it's classified and we need to follow orders. Taemin had dealt with classified operations before, but this felt different. The urgency in the message suggested something serious was happening, something big enough to pull all human ships away from an entire sector of space. 3 hours later, the long-range sensors detected something impossible. A massive object had appeared in Sector 7, moving faster than anything should be able to move. It was heading toward the Kepler system, where the mining colony was located. Sir, Sung Ho called out. We're receiving a transmission from that object. Put it on screen. The view screen flickered, and a woman's face appeared. She was wearing a uniform Taemin didn't recognize, with symbols that looked ancient and formal. Her eyes were hard, like someone who had seen too much war. This is Captain Jin'e of the Dreadnought Sol Prime, she said. All modern human vessels are to maintain safe distance. We are responding to an emergency signal. Taemin stepped forward. This is Admiral Taemin of the diplomatic vessel New Sol. Captain, I've never heard of your ship. What's your registry? Jin'e looked at him with something like pity. Admiral, my registry is older than your great-grandfather. Sol Prime has been sleeping for 3,000 years. We wake only when the final resort protocol is activated. Final resort? The term sounded familiar, but Taemin couldn't place it. Check your historical databases, Jin'e said. Look for the Great Silence. Look for what humanity used to be. The transmission ended, leaving Taemin staring at empty space. He turned to his staff with growing confusion. Nari, access the historical databases. Search for Great Silence and any reference to final resort protocols. Captain Nari worked at her console for several minutes before her face went pale. Sir, most of these files are sealed, but what I can access. She paused. Admiral, according to these records, humanity used to be very different. Different how? We weren't always traders and diplomats, sir. These files suggest we were warriors. The most feared military power in the galaxy. Taemin felt the ground shift under his feet. Everything he knew about human history said they had always been peaceful explorers, spreading through space with trade and diplomacy. That's impossible, he said. Show me what you found. The main screen filled with ancient star charts and battle reports. The dates went back thousands of years to humanity's first contact with alien species. But these weren't peaceful first meetings. They were conquests. System after system had fallen to human fleets. Entire civilizations had surrendered rather than face Earth's war machines. The record spoke of weapons that could destroy planets and ships that bent space itself. Sir, Nari whispered. Look at this report from 2,800 years ago. The file was heavily damaged, but parts were still readable. It described something called the Reality Wars, where human weapons had nearly torn holes in space itself. The report ended with a simple statement: all offensive systems to be sealed. The great silence begins now. Tae-min sat down heavily in his chair. Are you telling me that humanity voluntarily gave up being a military power? It looks that way, sir. But the weapons weren't destroyed. They were just put to sleep. More ships began appearing on the sensors. They came from empty space, from dead systems, from hiding places that had been secret for millennia. Each one was massive, dark, and moving with deadly purpose toward Sector 7. Sung-ho, try to contact one of those ships. I've been trying, sir. They're not responding to any of our standard channels. Tae-min watched the ancient fleet gather. Dozens of ships, then hundreds, all heading toward the same destination. Whatever had threatened the colony at Kepler 442b was about to face humanity's forgotten children. A new message came through from Earth Command, this one longer and more detailed. As Tae-min read it, he began to understand the magnitude of what was happening. The enemy wasn't just raiders or pirates. The files identified them as the Vorthak, a species that consumed entire worlds. They had appeared in force, with a fleet large enough to destroy whole star systems, but something had scared them away from the colony. Something that had answered an ancient distress call. Sir, Captain Nari said quietly, I found more files about the Final Resort Protocol. It was designed as a last line of defense, activated only when humanity or its allies faced extinction. And now it's been triggered, Tae-min realized. The implications were staggering. For 3,000 years, humanity had hidden its true nature, playing the role of peaceful traders while keeping their real strength sleeping in the dark. They had built a reputation for wisdom and fairness, never letting anyone suspect what they were capable of. But the weapons were still there, waiting, and now they were awake. Admiral, Sung-ho called out, we're receiving another transmission. This one is from the colony at Kepler 442b. The colonist who appeared on screen looked shaken but alive. His name was Hyun-woo, and he spoke with the voice of someone who had seen the impossible. To any human ships receiving this, he said, the Vorthak fleet has retreated. Something came out of deep space and scared them away. We're alive because of a ship called Sol Prime. Tae-min exchanged glances with his crew. The ancient war machines had protected the colony, just as they were designed to do. But what did this mean for humanity's future? Nari, set course for the outer system, he ordered. We need to see this for ourselves. As the new Sol moved toward Sector 7, Tae-min couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. Humanity's peaceful era might be coming to an end, and their forgotten legacy was about to reshape the galaxy. Tae-min stood in the archives deep beneath Earth's surface, surrounded by files that should not exist. 3 days had passed since the first ancient ship appeared, and Earth Command had finally granted him access to the sealed historical records. Dr. Yeon-soo, the chief archivist, led him through corridors lined with data cores. Her footsteps echoed in the silence as she spoke in hushed tones. Admiral, what you're about to see will change everything you think you know about our species, she said. These records have been sealed for good reason. She stopped at a massive vault door marked with symbols Tae-min didn't recognize. Ancient warnings in dozens of languages covered the entrance, all saying the same thing. Never again. The Great Silence wasn't just about putting away weapons, Dr. Yeon-soo explained as the door opened. It was about hiding what we really are. The first file she showed him contained images from humanity's home world, Earth, 3,000 years ago. But this wasn't the peaceful blue planet from modern textbooks. This was a world of endless storms, crushing gravity, and creatures that made nightmares look friendly. Earth tried to kill everything that lived on it, Dr. Yonsu said. 90% of all species died before they could evolve. Only the strongest, smartest, and most aggressive survived. Taemin stared at pictures of early humans fighting creatures with claws like swords and hide thick as armor. These weren't the peaceful farmers from his history books. These were predators, shaped by a world that demanded perfection or death. Humans didn't evolve to be peaceful, the archivist continued. They evolved to survive impossible odds. When they reached space, they brought that same drive with them. The next files showed humanity's expansion into the galaxy. But these weren't exploration missions. They were invasions. Human fleets swept through star systems like a plague, crushing any resistance they found. The Altrians who you just signed. A trade agreement with? Dr. Yonsu pulled up another file. 3,000 years ago, they ruled half the galaxy. It took humans 6 months to break their empire. Taemin felt sick as he read the battle reports. Human tactics were brutal and efficient. They didn't just defeat enemies. They made examples of them. Entire species learned to surrender at the first sight of human ships. Why? He asked. Why were we so violent? Because Earth taught us that the universe wants to kill you, she replied. Every planet humans found proved that lesson. Hostile environments, dangerous predators, civilizations that saw newcomers as threats. Humans learned to strike first and ask questions later. The files showed weapons that defied understanding. Ships that could crack planets in half. Bombs that turned stars into black holes. Soldiers who fought in armor that made them nearly invincible. The reality wars started when human scientists learned to weaponize physics itself, Dr. Yonsu explained. They built machines that could change the laws of nature in small areas. Space became a battlefield where time moved backward and gravity flowed uphill. Taemin read about the final battle, where human weapons nearly tore a hole in reality. The damage took centuries to repair, and space still showed scars from the fighting. That's when our leaders realized we had gone too far, the archivist said. The weapons were too powerful. If we kept using them, we might destroy the universe itself. The Great Silence began with a choice. Humanity could continue being the galaxy's apex predator, or they could become something else. They chose to put away their weapons and learn to live in peace. But the weapons weren't destroyed, Taemin realized. No. The leaders were smart enough to know that peace doesn't last forever. They built the final resort protocol as a backup plan. If humanity or their allies ever faced extinction, the old weapons would wake up. Dr. Yonsu showed him the last files, detailing how humanity had transformed itself. The warrior culture was replaced with trade and diplomacy. Children learned about cooperation instead of conquest. Within a few generations, most humans forgot what their ancestors had been capable of. Only a few people knew the truth, she said. The guardians who maintained the sleeping weapons, the archivists who kept the records, and the leaders who hoped this day would never come. Meanwhile, on Kepler 442b, Hyunwoo was discovering the truth for himself. The ship Sol Prime hung, in orbit like a dark moon, its hull covered in symbols that hurt to look at. Captain Jin-A had come down to the colony to meet with the survivors. She walked through the damaged streets with the confidence of someone who had seen worse. When she spoke to the colonists, her voice carried the weight of 3 millennia. You did well to survive, she told Hyunwoo. But the Vorthak will return with more ships. They always do. What are you? Bora asked. Your ship doesn't match any human design we know. Ginny smiled, but there was no warmth in it. We're what humans used to be, before we learned to pretend we were civilized. She showed them recordings from the Sol Prime's weapons test. A single shot had turned an asteroid the size of a city into glowing dust. The blast had been visible from light years away. The Vorthak ran because they remembered these weapons, Ginny explained. Their species has legends about the Deathmakers, who once ruled the galaxy. They thought we were all dead. But you're human, Hyunwoo protested. Just like us. No, Jin-A replied. We're what humans were before the Great Silence. We never learned to be peaceful. We've been sleeping in the dark, waiting for the day we'd be needed again. More ancient ships arrived in the system. Each one was unique, built for a specific type of warfare. Some were designed to crack planets. Others could fight entire fleets alone. All of them carried crews who had been sleeping for thousands of years. How many ships like yours are out there? Hyunwoo asked. Thousands, Jin-A said simply. Hidden in dead systems, asteroid fields, and empty space. The final resort protocol has awakened them all. Back on Earth, Taimin finished reading the last files. The truth was overwhelming. Humanity hadn't become peaceful because they were naturally gentle. They had chosen peace because they were too dangerous to remain warriors. The colonists sent their distress call on the final resort frequency, Dr. Yeon-soo explained. That signal has awakened every weapon system we ever built. The old guard is returning to active duty. What does this mean for us? Taimin asked. For modern humanity? I don't know, she admitted. We've spent 3,000 years becoming something different, but now our past is catching up with us. As if summoned by their conversation, Taimin's communicator buzzed with an urgent message. The Vorthak fleet had regrouped and was heading back toward human space, but they weren't alone anymore. Long-range sensors detected ships from dozens of hostile species, all moving toward the same target. They're forming an alliance, Taimin realized. They're all coming to fight us. Dr. Yeon-soo nodded grimly. Word has spread that the Deathmakers are awake. Every species that ever feared humanity is mobilizing their fleets. Taimin looked at the sealed files and understood the terrible irony. Humanity had spent 3,000 years earning the galaxy's trust and friendship. But the moment their true nature was revealed, every alliance and treaty would mean nothing. The ancient war machines were awakening, and the galaxy was preparing for a conflict that would make the reality wars look like a small disagreement. Humanity's long peace was over, and their forgotten children were coming home to roost. Jin-A stood on the bridge of Sol Prime and watched the Vorthak fleet approach. 2,000 ships spread across space like a dark cloud, each one bristling with biomechanical weapons. They had regrouped after their initial retreat and brought reinforcements. Captain, her weapons officer, Woo Jin, reported. Enemy fleet is in weapons range. They're demanding our surrender. Jin-A laughed, a sound like breaking glass. After 3,000 years of sleep, it felt good to face a real enemy again. She had awakened to find her species transformed into soft traders and diplomats. But war was still war. Open a channel to the colony, she ordered. Let them watch what human weapons can really do. On the planet below, Hyunwoo and his people gathered around communication screens. The Sol Prime floated alone in space, facing odds of 2,000 to 1. It should have been suicide. Why isn't she running? Bo-Ra whispered. Hyun-woo didn't answer. He was beginning to understand that Captain Jin-A came from a different time, when humans thought differently about impossible odds. The Vorthak fleet opened fire first. Thousands of plasma beams and biomissiles streaked through space toward the lone human ship. The colonists watched in horror, certain they were about to witness Jin-A's death. But Sol Prime didn't try to dodge. Instead, it did something that made space itself ripple. The ship's hull flickered and became transparent, and every enemy weapon passed through it like it wasn't there. Phase shifting, Jin-A explained over the communication channel. We exist in normal space only when we choose to. The Vorthak ships paused, confused by weapons that couldn't hit their target. That hesitation cost them everything. Sol Prime solidified and opened fire with its main gun. But this wasn't a normal energy weapon. The shot tore through space-time itself, creating a corridor of twisted gravity that reached across the battlefield. The first Vorthak ship caught in the beam simply folded in on itself. Its hull crumpled like paper as gravity pulled it inside out. The ship next to it suffered the same fate, then the next, then dozens more. Weaponized gravity, Jin-A said calmly. We learned to make black holes obey us. Hyun-woo watched in stunned silence as Sol Prime carved through the enemy fleet like it was made of cardboard. Each shot from the ancient ship destroyed multiple targets, bending space until the Vorthak vessels couldn't exist in the same reality. But the real terror came when Jin-A activated Sol Prime's secondary weapons. The ship split apart, revealing that it wasn't one vessel but dozens of smaller ships hidden inside its hull. Each piece moved independently, surrounding the remaining Vorthak fleet like a pack of wolves. Modular design, Jin-A explained. We are many, acting as one. The smaller ships opened fire with weapons the colonists couldn't understand. Some shots made enemy vessels age centuries in seconds. Others turned solid matter into pure energy. One weapon simply erased targets from existence, leaving empty space where ships used to be. The Vorthak fleet broke apart in panic. Ships fled in every direction. But Sol Prime's components hunted them down with ruthless efficiency. Within an hour, 2,000 enemy vessels had been reduced to glowing debris. Impossible, Bo-Ra breathed. How did they build weapons like that? The answer came from Captain Nari aboard the New Sol, which had been monitoring the battle from a safe distance. She had been digging through the historical files, trying to understand what they had just witnessed. Admiral, she reported to Tae-min. I found references to Sol Prime in the archives. It was one of the first reality warships, built when humans were learning to weaponize physics itself. Tae-min studied the readings from the battle. The energy signatures didn't match anything in modern human technology. How old is that ship? 3,200 years, sir. It was built during humanity's expansion phase when they were conquering the galaxy. The implications were staggering. Sol Prime wasn't just an ancient ship, it was a relic from humanity's darkest period, and there were thousands more just like it, awakening from their long sleep. More ancient vessels began arriving in the system. Each one was different, designed for specific types of warfare. The dreadnought Busan's hammer specialized in planetary destruction. The carrier Incheon's swarm commanded fleets of self-replicating fighters. The stealth ship Daigu's shadow could hide entire fleets from enemy sensors. Their captains were all like Jinni, humans from the old days who had never learned to be peaceful. They spoke in terms of total victory and acceptable losses, viewing warfare as a science to be perfected. Captain Jin-A, Tae-min transmitted from his ship. I'm Admiral Tae-min, representing modern human command. We need to discuss what happens next. Jin'e's image appeared on his screen, and her expression was not friendly. "Modern command?" she said. "You mean the people who forgot how to fight?" "We chose peace," Taemin replied. "We built a better way of living." "And how did that work out when the Vorthak came calling?" Jin'e asked. "Your colonists would be dead if we hadn't answered their call." Taemin couldn't argue with that. The modern human military was designed for peacekeeping and defense, not the kind of total war that ancient ships were built for. "The galaxy has changed," he said. "We have allies now, treaties, trade agreements. If we start acting like conquerors again, we'll lose everything we've built." Jin'e studied him like he was an interesting specimen. "Admiral, do you know what the Vorthak call this invasion?" "No. The final harvest. They're not just coming for human colonies. They plan to consume every civilized world in the galaxy." The transmission switched to tactical displays showing Vorthak fleets throughout known space. Dozens of species were under attack, their worlds burning as the biomechanical swarms stripped them bare. "Your allies and trade partners are dying," Jin'e continued. "While you worry about treaties, entire civilizations are being eaten alive." Taemin felt the weight of command pressing down on him. Modern humanity prided itself on being better than their ancestors, but those ancestors had never faced extinction. "What do you suggest?" he asked. "We do what we were built to do," Jin'e replied. "We fight the way humans were meant to fight. Total war, no mercy, complete victory." "And after the war? What happens to the galaxy then?" Jin'e was quiet for a moment. "That depends on whether your generation can learn to be human again." The transmission ended, leaving Taemin staring at empty space. Around him, his crew worked with nervous efficiency, processing reports from across the galaxy. The Vorthak invasion was spreading faster than anyone had imagined. On Kepler 442b, Hyunwoo watched the ancient ships gather in orbit. Each new arrival brought weapons that defied understanding and crews who spoke of war like it was an art form. "Are they really human?" Bora asked. Hyunwoo thought about Jin'e's cold efficiency and the way she had destroyed an entire fleet without hesitation. "They're what we used to be," he said, "before we learned to be ashamed of winning." The old guard was returning, and they brought with them the terrible legacy of humanity's forgotten power. Whether that was salvation or damnation remained to be seen. But as more enemy fleets gathered in the darkness beyond known space, one thing was becoming clear. The galaxy was about to remember why it had once feared the name of humanity. News of Sol Prime's victory spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within days, every spacefaring civilization knew that humanity's ancient war machines had returned. The reactions were as varied as they were predictable. The Altrian Republic immediately recalled their ambassadors from human space. The peaceful Centauri Commonwealth closed their borders and began mobilizing defensive fleets. Even humanity's closest allies started viewing trade agreements with suspicious eyes. Admiral Taemin sat in his ready room aboard the New Sol, reading diplomatic protests and demands for explanation. His communicator buzzed constantly with messages from panicked government officials across the galaxy. "Sir," Captain Nari entered with a grim expression. "Earth Command is ordering us to rendezvous with Captain Jin'e. They want you to serve as liaison between modern humanity and the returning fleet." Taemin set down the datapad full of angry messages. "A liaison position between two different versions of our own species. How did it come to this?" The answer was becoming clearer every day. Humanity had spent 3,000 years building a reputation as peaceful traders and wise mediators. Now, in the span of a week, that carefully constructed image was crumbling as ancient warships emerged from the darkness. The meeting took place aboard Sol Prime in a conference room that felt like a tomb. The walls were covered with battle, honors from wars no living human remembered. Jin-A sat at the head of a metal table, surrounded by other captains who had awakened from their long sleep. Tae-min entered to find himself facing legends made flesh. Captain Dong-hyun of Busan's Hammer, whose ship could crack planets in half. Captain Mi-young of Incheon's Swarm, who commanded fleets of self-replicating fighters. Captain Jun-ho of Daegu's Shadow, whose stealth technology could hide entire star systems. Admiral, Jin-A greeted him. Welcome to the real human navy. Taemin took his seat and tried not to feel intimidated. These captains had commanded fleets when his ancestors were still learning to walk upright. Their casual mentions of destroying star systems and enslaving species made his diplomatic training feel useless. How many ships have answered the final resort protocol? He asked. 3,412 dreadnoughts, Dong-hyun replied, plus support vessels, carriers, and specialist ships. The full strength of humanity's war machine. The numbers were staggering. Modern humanity's entire military consisted of maybe 100 ships designed for peacekeeping. The ancient fleet outnumbered them 30-1. Where have you all been hiding? Tae-min asked. Everywhere, Mi-young answered. Asteroid fields, dead systems, the space between galaxies. We built our hiding places during the Great Silence and went to sleep, waiting for the day we'd be needed again. Jun-ho activated a holographic display showing the galaxy. Red dots appeared throughout known space, each representing an awakening war machine. Our network spans every corner of civilized space. We've been watching, listening, protecting from the shadows. Taemin stared at the display. The ancient ships weren't just randomly scattered. They formed a defensive grid that covered every major star system, every trade route, every strategic position. You've been guarding us, he realized. All this time, while we thought we were living in peace, you were standing watch. Someone had to, Jin-A said. Your modern humans are skilled at trade and diplomacy, but war requires a different kind of thinking. She brought up tactical reports from across the galaxy. The Vorthak invasion was larger than anyone had imagined. Entire sectors were going. Dark as biomechanical swarms consumed world after world. The enemy isn't just the Vorthak, Jin-A continued. We've identified at least 6 other hostile species using this invasion as cover for their own attacks. Taemin read the reports with growing horror. The Krillian Empire was seizing outer colony worlds. The Void Hunters were raiding shipping lanes. The Synthetic Collective was launching cyber attacks on planetary defense networks. They're all moving. At once, he said. Like they planned this together. They did. Dong-hyun confirmed. Long-range sensors show enemy fleets massing in the outer dark, beyond the edge of known space. This isn't random aggression. It's a coordinated assault on galactic civilization. The implications were staggering. While humanity had been playing the role of peaceful traders, their enemies had been forming alliances and planning invasions. The Vorthak were just the first wave. How long do we have? Taemin asked. Weeks, maybe less, Mi-young replied. The main enemy fleet is moving toward the core worlds. If they capture the major population centers, this war is over before it begins. Back on Kepler 442b, Hyunwoo was dealing with his own revelations. The colony's sensors had detected something disturbing in the outer system. Vorthak spy probes, hidden in the asteroid belt for months before the invasion. "They've been watching us," Bora reported. "These probes have been recording everything. Our defenses, our population, our daily routines." Yunwu studied the data with a growing sense of unease. "They didn't just happen to find us. This was planned, down to the smallest detail." The probe data revealed the scope of Vorthak intelligence gathering. They had mapped every human colony, every trade route, every military installation. The invasion wasn't opportunistic, it was surgical. "Sir," one of the technicians called out, "I'm finding similar probes throughout human space. Hundreds of them, all reporting back to the same source." The truth hit Hyunwoo like a physical blow. They've been planning this for years, maybe decades. When he reported his findings to Captain Ginny, her reaction was grimly unsurprised. "Of course they have," she said. "The Vorthak don't attack randomly. They study their prey, learn their weaknesses, then strike at the perfect moment." "But why now?" Hyunwoo asked. "What changed?" Jin's expression darkened. "They thought we were extinct. The galaxy has spent 3,000 years believing that humanity's war machines were gone forever. Our enemies saw weakness and decided to take advantage." The communication channel expanded to include other ancient captains. Each one brought reports of enemy movements and long-term infiltration. "The Krillians have been positioning sleeper fleets for 50 years, Captain Jun-ho reported. "The Void Hunters have maps of every human trade route. The Synthetic Collective has back doors in our communication networks. A coordinated effort," Jin-A summarized. "While modern humanity was building trust and friendship, our enemies were preparing for war." Taemin felt the weight of 3,000 years of peaceful policy crashing down around him. "We made ourselves vulnerable," he admitted. "We became so focused on being better than our ancestors that we forgot why they were feared." "Your generation isn't to blame," Jin-A said. "The Great Silence was necessary. Humanity needed to learn restraint, to become something other than conquerors. But restraint without strength is just weakness." The meeting was interrupted by urgent alerts from across the galaxy. Long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures in the outer dark, beyond the edge of explored space. Something enormous was moving toward civilized worlds. "The main fleet," Dong-hyun said grimly. "They're finally making their move." The tactical display updated with new contacts. Thousands of ships, maybe tens of thousands, all moving toward the core worlds with deadly purpose. But these weren't just Vorthak vessels. The fleet included ships from dozens of species, all united in their desire to see civilization burn. "How do we fight that?" Taemin asked. Jin-I stood and activated the room's main display. It showed the full strength of humanity's awakened war machine. Thousands of dreadnoughts, carriers, and specialist vessels all moving into position. "The same way we always have," she said. "We remind the galaxy why they used to fear us." But, even as the ancient fleet gathered, Taemin couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. The enemy forces were too large, too well coordinated. The Vorthak and their allies had been planning this invasion for decades, studying every weakness and preparing for every contingency. "Captain," he said quietly, "are you sure we can win this?" Jin-A looked at him with eyes that had seen the rise and fall of empires. "Admiral, we're humanity. We don't win wars because we're stronger or smarter than our enemies. We win because we're too stubborn to lose." Outside the viewports, more ancient ships continued to arrive. Each one carried weapons that could reshape reality and crews who had never learned the meaning of surrender. The old guard was returning in full force, and the galaxy was about to remember what humanity was truly capable of. But in the darkness beyond known space, enemy fleets gathered like storm clouds, carrying secrets that would test even humanity's legendary resolve. The revelation came from the most unlikely source, a dying Vorthak ship, crippled by Sol Prime's reality-bending weapons, and drifting in the void near Kepler 442b. Captain Jin A decided to board the wreck personally, bringing Hyun Woo along to serve as translator. The inside of the Vorthak vessel was a nightmare of organic technology and biomechanical interfaces. Walls pulsed like living tissue, and the air tasted of copper and decay. Ginny moved through the corridors with practiced efficiency, her weapon ready for any threat. "I've never seen anything like this," Hyun-woo whispered, trying not to touch the writhing surfaces. "I have," Ginny replied grimly. 3,000 years ago, we fought things like this. The Vorthak were just as hungry then, but they were limited to their home systems. They found the ship's commander in what passed for a bridge, its biomechanical body fused with the control systems. The creature was dying, its organic components failing as the ship's life support systems shut down. "Why attack now?" Jin-A demanded, her translator converting her words into the Vorthak's chittering language. "Why break the ancient treaties?" The creature's response sent chills down Hyun-woo's spine. Through painful clicks and electronic harmonics, it spoke of masters beyond the galaxy's edge, beings of pure entropy who consumed not just matter and energy, but the very concept of existence itself. "The Entropy Collective," Ginny breathed, her face going pale. "I thought they were just legends." The dying Vorthok continued its confession. The biomechanical species hadn't chosen to invade. They had been enslaved by entities that existed outside normal reality. The collective fed on ordered existence, turning organized matter and energy into chaos and void. The Vorthak are just scouts, Hyun-woo translated, testing the galaxy's defenses, identifying weak points. Jin-A's communicator crackled with urgent transmissions from other ancient captains. Similar confessions were being extracted from captured enemy commanders across known space. The pattern was always the same: enslavement by beings from beyond. "Reality, Captain," Admiral Taemin's voice came through the channel. "We're receiving long-range sensor data from the outer monitoring stations. You need to see this." The holographic display showed the edge of known space, where ancient human sensors had been watching the darkness for millennia. Something was moving out there, something vast enough to bend space-time just by existing. "How big is that thing?" Hyun-woo asked. Jin-I studied the readings with growing dread. "It's not a ship," she said. "It's a living entity the size of a solar system." More contacts appeared on the sensors, dozens of similar entities, all moving toward the galaxy with inexorable purpose. They didn't travel through space so much as they replaced it, turning ordered reality into howling chaos wherever they passed. "The Entropy Collective," Jin-A confirmed. "They're real, and they're coming." Back on Earth, in the deepest archives, beneath the planet's surface, Dr. Yeon-soo was frantically searching through files that predated even the Great Silence. Ancient human strategists had encountered references to the collective during their expansion across the galaxy. "Admiral Taemin," she transmitted to his ship, "I found records of previous collective invasions. They come every 50,000 years when civilizations have had time to develop and spread. The files painted a terrifying picture. The Entropy Collective existed in the spaces between realities, feeding on order and structure. They would appear at the edge of a galaxy, corrupt or enslave the local species, then use those forces to prepare the way for their own arrival. Previous invasions? Taemin asked. How many galaxies have they consumed? Unknown, Dr. Yan-Su replied. But the patterns suggest they've been doing this for millions of years. Andromeda went dark 60,000 years ago. The Magellanic Clouds stopped transmitting 30,000 years ago. The implications were staggering. Entire galaxies had been consumed by entities that existed beyond normal understanding. The Milky Way was just the latest target in an endless campaign of universal destruction. Why didn't the ancient humans fight them before? Taemin asked. Jin-A answered from the Vorthak ship. Because we didn't know they existed. The collective works through proxies, corrupting species and turning them into willing servants. By the time anyone realizes the truth, it's too late. The dying Vorthak commander confirmed this with its final words. The biomechanical species had been peaceful once, exploring the galaxy and building colonies. Then the collective found them, offered them power and immortality in exchange for service. They showed us how to consume other species, the creature chittered. Promised us we would become like them, beings of pure entropy. We believed their lies until it was too late to resist. Jin-A put the creature out of its misery with a single shot, but the damage was done. The galaxy was facing an enemy that had consumed countless civilizations across millions of years. How do we fight something like that? Hyunwoo asked. The answer came from an unexpected source. The ancient human war machines themselves. As the true nature of the threat became clear, automated systems that had been dormant for millennia began activating on their own. Captain Dong-hyun reported from Busan's Hammer that his ship's artificial intelligence was accessing files he'd never seen before. It's like the ship remembers something I don't, he said. The AI keeps mentioning something called the final contingency. Similar reports came from other ancient vessels. Their computer systems were preparing for a type of warfare that even the old guard had never experienced. Weapons that attacked reality itself were being readied for deployment. The original builders knew, Jin-A realized. When they designed the Final Resort Protocol, they weren't just planning for conventional threats. They were preparing for this. The revelation changed everything. The Great Silence hadn't just been about putting away humanity's weapons. It had been about preparing for the ultimate test. Ancient human strategists had studied the patterns of galactic destruction and built their war machines specifically to fight beings like the Entropy Collective. That's why the weapons are so powerful. Taemin understood. They're not designed to fight other species. They're designed to fight entities that exist outside reality. The tactical display updated with new sensor readings. The Collective's advance forces were already in the galaxy, corrupting star systems, and turning them into staging areas for the main invasion. Entire worlds were being transformed into something that hurt to look at, their matter and energy becoming fuel for creatures that shouldn't exist. How long do we have? Taemin asked. Jin-A checked the ancient sensors and felt her blood turn cold. Days, maybe hours. They're moving faster than anything should be able to move. The enemy wasn't just approaching, they were rewriting the laws of physics as they advanced. Space itself was becoming hostile to ordered existence, making it harder for conventional ships to operate. Signal all human vessels, Jin-A ordered. Ancient and modern, military and civilian, everyone needs to know what we're really fighting. As the truth spread across human space, panic gave way to grim determination. This wasn't a war for territory or resources. This was a fight for the right to exist in an ordered universe. The Entropy Collective had consumed countless galaxies, turning billions of civilizations into chaos and void. They had enslaved species like the Vorthak and used them as tools to soften their targets, but they had never faced humanity before. They had never encountered a species that had voluntarily put away the power to destroy universes, then built even stronger weapons while they waited for the ultimate threat. The ancient war machines were awakening to their true purpose, and the galaxy was about to witness the final test of human resolve. The greatest predators in the universe were about to discover what happened when they tried to consume something that refused to be prey. The first Entropy Collective entities breached the galaxy's edge on a Tuesday morning, ship time. Admiral Tae-min watched from the bridge of New Seoul as reality itself began to unravel along the outer rim worlds. Stars went out not because they died, but because the concept of light ceased to exist in their vicinity. "Sir," Captain Nari reported, her voice shaking, "we're receiving final transmissions from the Kepler-7 system. They're saying space itself is turning inside out." The main screen showed feed from the doomed system's last operational sensor. What Taemin saw defied understanding. Ships that moved through 11 dimensions, weapons that fired concentrated nothingness, creatures that existed as living violations of physics. "This is what destroyed entire galaxies," he whispered. Around him, his crew struggled to process sensor readings that made no sense. How do you track something that exists outside the normal flow of time? How do you target an enemy that phases in and out of reality at will? The answer came from Captain Jin-A aboard Sol Prime. "You don't fight them with conventional tactics," her voice crackled through the communication system. "You fight them with weapons that are just as impossible." Ancient human war machines were moving into position throughout the galaxy, but these weren't the ships that had fought the Vorthak. The AI systems had reconfigured themselves, activating weapon systems that had been dormant for millennia. "All modern human vessels withdraw to the core worlds," Jin-A ordered. "What happens next isn't safe for ships built with normal physics." Taemin wanted to argue, but he'd seen enough to know when he was outclassed. "All ships, fall back to Earth. We'll coordinate evacuation efforts from there." The real war began in the outer systems, where ancient dreadnoughts met entities that shouldn't exist. Captain Dong-hyun engaged the first collective scout with weapons that turned matter into mathematical concepts. Busan's hammer fired equations that redefined the laws of physics in local space. "Target destroyed," Dong-hyun reported, "but it cost us. The ship's reality stabilizers are operating at maximum capacity." Similar reports came from across the battlefront. The ancient weapons could hurt the collective entities, but each engagement pushed human technology to its absolute limits. Ships that had fought for millennia were burning out their systems just to remain coherent in the face of living chaos. Meanwhile, on Kepler 442b, Hyunwoo was coordinating the largest evacuation in human history. Civilian ships from across the galaxy were converging on the colony, picking up refugees and supplies before fleeing toward the core worlds. "How many have we gotten out?" Bo-Ra asked, managing communications with exhausted efficiency. 50,000. "So far," Hyunwoo replied. "But there are still millions of colonists on the outer worlds." The evacuation was complicated by the nature of the enemy. Collective entities didn't just destroy planets, they corrupted them, turning ordered matter into chaos stuff that infected everything it touched. Entire systems had to be abandoned, rather than risk spreading the contamination. "Sir," one of the technicians called out, "we're receiving a transmission from Captain Jin-A. She wants to speak with you personally." Jin-A's image appeared on the screen, and Hyunwoo was shocked by what he saw. The ancient captain looked older, worn down by battles that defied description. Her uniform was scorched by energies that shouldn't exist. "Hyunwoo," she said, "I need you to understand something. This war isn't going to be won by weapons alone." "What do you mean?" "The collective feeds on chaos and disorder. Every time we fight them, we create more of what they need to survive. We're feeding the enemy just by existing in the same space." The implications were horrifying. How do you fight an enemy that grows stronger from conflict itself? "There's another way," Jin-A continued, "but it requires cooperation between ancient and modern humanity. Your people have something we lost: the ability to create order from chaos." She explained the plan with the calm efficiency of someone who had accepted impossible odds. The ancient war machines would continue fighting, using their reality-bending weapons to contain the collective entities. But the real battle would be fought by modern humans using their skills in organization and cooperation to maintain order in the face of entropy. "You want us to fight chaos with civilization," Hyunwoo understood. "Exactly. Every functioning system, every act of cooperation, every moment of peace and order is a weapon against the collective. They can corrupt matter and energy, but they can't corrupt the human spirit." The strategy required unprecedented cooperation between two very different versions of humanity. Ancient warriors and modern diplomats had to work together, each providing what the other lacked. Captain Taemin found himself commanding evacuation fleets while coordinating with captains who were older than recorded history. The ancient war machines carved safe passages through corrupted space, while modern ships organized refugee convoys and maintained supply lines. "It's working," Nari reported after their first joint operation. "The collective entities are avoiding areas where we have strong organizational structures. But the enemy was adapting too. The entities began targeting civilian populations directly, trying to create chaos and panic that would feed their power. Entire worlds fell to madness as the collective broadcast visions of entropy and despair. "They're learning," Jin-A warned during a strategy meeting. "Every tactic we use, they develop counters. We need to escalate." The escalation came in the form of weapons that shouldn't exist. Captain Mi-young activated Incheon's Swarm's ultimate system, self-replicating fighters that existed in parallel realities simultaneously. The Ghost Fleet could engage collective entities on multiple dimensional levels at once. "Reality fighters deployed," Mi-young reported. "They're engaging targets that exist in 11 dimensions. Similar weapons came online across the ancient fleet. Ships that folded space into impossible geometries. Bombs that exploded backward through time. Defensive systems that protected by making attacks happened to different targets entirely. The war became a contest between competing impossibilities. The collective brought weapons that attacked the fundamental forces holding reality together. Humanity responded with technology that redefined what reality meant in the first place. "Status report," Taemin requested after a particularly brutal engagement. "We're holding them," Jin-A replied, "but barely. Every battle costs us more than we can afford. Ships are burning out their reality stabilizers. Captains are going insane from exposure to pure entropy." The human cost was staggering. Ancient crews who had survived 3,000 years of sleep were dying in battles that lasted minutes. Modern humans were working around the clock to maintain the organizational structures that kept chaos at bay. But slowly, impossibly, they were winning. The collective's advance had been stopped at the edge of civilized space. Their corrupted systems were being contained by human order and discipline. "How long can we keep this up?" Hyun-woo asked during one of their coordination meetings. Jin Ia looked at readings that showed ancient ships operating far beyond their design limits. "Not long enough. The collective has reinforcements coming, entities so powerful they make the first wave look like scouts." The main enemy fleet was still approaching from outside the galaxy. When it arrived, the current battle would seem like a gentle skirmish. Humanity needed a way to end the war decisively before their forces burned out completely. "There is one option," Ginny said quietly. "But it means crossing a line we swore never to cross again." She brought up files that were sealed even from the ancient captains. Weapons that had been built during the reality wars but never used, deemed too dangerous even for humanity's darkest hour. "The silence engines," she explained. "They don't just destroy targets, they erase them from existence entirely, removing all trace that they ever existed. The ultimate weapons, capable of unmaking entire star systems. Humanity's final answer to threats that couldn't be fought with conventional force. Using them means becoming something worse than the collective," Taemin protested. "We'd be destroying reality itself." "Sometimes," Jinne replied, "the only way to save something is to be willing to destroy it." The choice hung in the air like a death sentence. Use weapons that could end the universe, or watch the galaxy fall to entropy. Either way, the humanity that emerged from this war would be forever changed. The final battle took place in the space between galaxies, where the Entropy Collective had been gathering its true strength. Captain Jin A led the last charge of humanity's dreadnoughts toward entities that existed as living wounds in reality itself. "All ships, final approach," she transmitted across the ancient fleet. "Remember, this isn't about winning, it's about making sure they never threaten another galaxy." Beside her on Sol Prime's bridge, Admiral Taemin watched instruments that registered impossible readings. The enemy's main force was larger than anyone had imagined. Creatures the size of solar systems floated in the void, their presence warping space-time just by existing. "Sir," Captain Nari reported from her position at the tactical station, "the collective entities are beginning to merge. They're forming something even bigger. The enemy was combining into a single entity of such massive entropy that its completion would unravel the fundamental forces holding the galaxy together. If the collective succeeded, not just stars and planets would die, but the very concepts of matter and energy would cease to exist." "Time to target formation?" Jinne asked. 17 minutes, came the reply from Dong-hyun aboard Busan's hammer. "But sir, our reality stabilizers are already at maximum. We won't survive direct contact with something that big." Jinny had known this moment would come. The ancient ships had pushed their impossible technology beyond all safety limits. Reality bending. Weapons that had once seemed unstoppable were now barely holding the fleet together. "All ships, prepare the silence engines," she ordered. The transmission sent shock waves through both ancient and modern human forces. The silence engines were weapons that shouldn't exist, capable of erasing targets from reality so completely that they never existed in the first place. "Captain," Taemin protested, "using those weapons could unravel causality itself. The damage might spread beyond our intended targets." "I know," Jinne replied quietly. But look at what we're facing. The main screen showed the collective entity reaching final form. It was no longer just a creature. It was a living violation of physics, a wound in existence that grew larger with each passing moment. Space itself was becoming unstable around it. If we don't stop this now, there won't be a galaxy left to save, Jin'ei continued. The silence engines are our only option. Back on Earth, Dr. Yan-Su was coordinating with the planet's greatest scientists and philosophers. The decision to use ultimate weapons couldn't be made by military commanders alone. It required the consent of the species itself. The vote is complete, she transmitted to the fleet. Humanity authorizes the use of silence engines. May whatever God watches over us forgive what we're about to do. Captain Dong Hyun was the first to activate his ship's ultimate weapon. Busan's hammer began to glow with energies that existed outside normal space-time. The ship's hull became transparent as reality bent around the charging weapon. "Silence engine online," he reported. "Target locked on collective formation. Sir, my crew is requesting permission to speak with their families one last time." Jin'ei felt her heart break. The silence engines required their operators to exist partially outside reality during firing. Most crews wouldn't survive the process. "Permission granted," she said. "All ships, open personal communication channels." Across the ancient fleet, crews said goodbye to loved ones they hadn't seen in 3,000 years. Modern humans watched, in horror, as their legendary ancestors prepared to sacrifice themselves for a galaxy that had forgotten their names. On Kepler 442b, Hyunwoo received a transmission from Jin'ei personally. Her image flickered with dimensional static as Sol Prime's systems strained beyond their limits. "Hyunwoo," she said, "I need you to promise me something. When this is over, don't let them remember us as monsters. We were human once, just like you." "You're still human," he protested. "You're saving all of us." Jin'ei smiled sadly. "Maybe, but the weapons we're about to use will change us into something else, something that shouldn't exist in a civilized galaxy." The collective entity reached critical mass, its presence beginning to tear holes in space-time. Stars near the battle began to flicker out as reality became unstable. "All ships, fire when ready," Jin'ei ordered. Busan's hammer fired first. The silence engine's beam wasn't visible in normal space. It existed in dimensions that hurt to perceive. When it struck the collective entity, part of the creature simply ceased to exist, erased so completely that the universe forgot it had ever been there. But the weapon's power came at a terrible cost. Dong Hyun's ship began to phase in and out of reality, its crew existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Through the communication channel, Taemin could hear Dong Hyun screaming as his consciousness was scattered across impossible spaces. "Target damaged, but still coherent," Tactical reported. "We need more firepower." Sol Prime and Incheon swarm. Fired together, their silence engines combining into a beam that attacked the very concept of the collective's existence. The enemy entity recoiled, parts of its massive form simply vanishing from reality. But humanity paid the price for each shot. The ancient ships were burning themselves out, their crews dying as they operated weapons that no living thing should touch. Captain Mi Young's final transmission was a whisper. "Tell my family I remembered them at the end." More ships fired their ultimate weapons. Daegu's Shadow, Gwangju's Wrath, Ulsan's Fury, each ancient vessel sacrificing itself to erase pieces of the enemy from existence. The space between galaxies lit up with energies that redefined what light meant. "It's working," Nari reported. The collective entity is losing coherence. But, sir, we're losing ships faster than we can replace them. Jinneh watched her fleet die around her. These ships and crews had survived 3,000 years of sleep, awakened to fight an impossible war, and now were sacrificing themselves for a galaxy that would never know their names. All remaining ships, concentrate fire on the entity's core, she ordered. One final push. Sol Prime's silence engine charged for the last time. Jinneh could feel the weapon tearing at her mind, showing her glimpses of what existed beyond reality. The things she saw would have driven her insane if she had planned to survive the experience. "Admiral Taemin," she said, "take command of the evacuation. Get everyone as far away from here as possible." "What about you?" Taemin asked. "Someone has to make sure the collective can't regenerate." Sol Prime will stay behind and maintain the silence field. It was a death sentence, and they both knew it. Operating a silence engine for extended periods would scatter Jinneh's consciousness across dimensions she couldn't comprehend. "Captain," Taemin said formally, "it has been an honor serving with you." Jinneh smiled one last time. "The honor was mine, Admiral. Now go. Save our people." Sol Prime fired its final shot, a beam of concentrated nothingness that struck the collective entity's core. The creature's death scream echoed across dimensions as it was erased from existence, taking with it all memory that it had ever existed. But the victory came at an unthinkable cost. Half the ancient fleet was gone, erased along with their target. The surviving ships were damaged beyond repair, their crews forever changed by exposure to weapons that violated natural law. Jinneh felt her consciousness beginning to scatter as Sol Prime's reality field collapsed. In her final moments, she watched the galaxy stabilize as space-time healed from the collective's presence. The war was over. Humanity had saved not just their own galaxy, but potentially countless others that the collective might have targeted. But the price had been everything they thought they knew about themselves. In the years that followed, the survivors tried to rebuild. Admiral Taemin led the effort to restore order to damaged star systems, while Hyun Woo helped coordinate the largest reconstruction project in galactic history. The ancient weapons were sealed away once more, but this time the knowledge of their true purpose remained. Humanity had learned that sometimes the only way to preserve civilization was to be willing to become something monstrous. Dr. Yan Su established new archives, recording the true story of the war for future generations. The galaxy would remember that humanity had saved them, but few would ever know the full cost of that salvation. Bo-Ra, now an admiral herself, stood in the memorial garden on New Earth and read the names of the lost. Thousands of ancient warriors, who had sacrificed everything for people they barely knew. "Were we right to let them do it?" she asked Hyun Woo, who had become the keeper of their memory. "I don't know," he replied honestly. "But I know we're alive because of them. Sometimes that has to be enough." The galaxy was safe, but humanity carried new scars. They had proven they could defeat anything, even entities that existed beyond reality itself. But they had also proven they were capable of becoming the very monsters they fought against. The ancient war machines slept once more, hidden in the darkness between stars. And humanity returned to their role as peaceful traders and diplomats, carrying the secret knowledge that they were something far more dangerous than they appeared. The collective was gone, erased so completely that only a few humans remembered it had ever existed. But the weapons that defeated it remained, waiting in the shadows for the day they might be needed again. And in the deepest vaults beneath Earth, new protocols were written. instructions for future generations, should they ever face a threat.